Hey everyone, I'm a fool by nature. I'm foolish in how I think and what I do, across pretty much every topic and situation. On YouTube, I see people sharing useful knowledge for others to learn from, or showing off their talents and getting lots of praise. So I figured I'd share my own wrong, foolish thoughts so you can pull some helpful lessons out of them. Today I'm going to tell you about 10 misguided beliefs I've had when gambling. For example, the money I just won is the house's money, so go big. Or, if I've lost a lot, my turn to win is coming. Or, next round I should double my bet to make back this loss. Pretty entertaining, right? Just a heads up, I'm sharing these stories in a light, friendly way. I'm not a gambling expert. This video isn't only about lessons to help us prevent and avoid the negative effects of gambling. It's also something you can put on to relax or even drift off to sleep. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to know what a fool like me would think in a specific situation, drop it in the comments. I'll break it down for you. Thanks so much. Now, let's get into the story. 1. After losing so much, it's got to be my turn to win. It was a weekend in Atlantic City after my cousin's wedding. A friend and I slipped away from the family crowd to swing by a casino for a couple of hours. I still had my dress shirt on from the reception, tie stuffed into my jacket pocket. The place smelled like new carpet with background music blending into the whir of machines. I told myself I was just there to look around and try a little, then leave. I had a clear goal in my head. Make a small amount to buy a dishwasher for my mom. I'd already looked at a few models online and figured I only needed a little extra to cover it. I felt excited and confident. We headed straight to a roulette table. I watched a few spins to get a feel. Black kept hitting. The history screen showed a long run of black. A few people nearby murmured, everyone clocking that streak. A very clear thought popped into my head. After so many blacks, red is due. I started believing red was about to show. I told myself that if I nailed it once, I'd have enough for the gift. I put a few chips on red to test the waters. The next spin came up black again. I felt a twinge of regret, but I still believed the odds had to be fair to me. I started increasing my bet each round. From small to medium. I tossed a little onto my favorite number for fun, like a fast way to make it all back if it hit. I knew I was taking a risk, but I convinced myself that's what it would take to get the gift before I went home. In my head I counted 1, 2, 3, black again, and I told myself I'd found the rhythm. In reality, I was just forcing a pattern to feel in control when I wasn't controlling anything. The black streak kept going. I heard the rattle of the ball and the soft sighs around the table. I felt heated, not mad at anyone, just hot-faced with helplessness. I thought of my mom. I'd already bragged that I was free this weekend, that I'd stop by with a surprise. I didn't want to give up because of that promise. I pushed chips onto red again, harder. I told myself it was just one more time. I sprinkled a few on my favorite number again, like hanging another little hope. I knew I was raising my bet out of frustration, but I looked away from that truth because I was afraid to face the fact that I was losing. A few more spins went the same way. Black again. I swallowed. My hand shook a little, but the mix of regret and greed was peaking. I checked my wallet. The cash was thinning out. I thought about the ATM nearby. I knew a cash advance at a casino would be expensive, but my brain had only one track. Win it back first, deal with fees later. I went to withdraw. When the amount and the fee message flashed on the screen, I hesitated for a second, then hit confirm anyway. Walking back to the table, it felt like I'd just poured gas into a car already speeding toward a cliff. I glued myself to the roulette table. I counted in my head, trying to hear the ball like it carried a signal. I kept telling myself, Red had been bottled up too long. I raised my bet again. I didn't say anything out loud, but the sentence in my head was sharp. 1 hit is all I need. I pictured driving home that night, stopping by the appliance store, swiping my card, bringing the receipt back to show Mom. That picture felt so good that I closed my eyes to the risk rising in front of me. At the peak, I shoved almost everything I had left onto red. I slid a bright row of chips onto red and tossed a small stack on my favorite number. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my neck. I held my breath. The wheel spun. Everyone watched. I tried to look calm, but my palms were slick. I told myself that if it landed on red, I'd stand up and leave immediately. I was sure this was my last shot. The ball slowed, hopped twice, and dropped into black. I froze. For a beat, my head was empty. The music disappeared. All I saw was the digital board adding another black dot. I stood still, then finally exhaled, but there was no relief. Just a quiet hollow in my chest, followed by the stab of wasted money, then the shame of having pushed myself to this point. The ending came fast. I checked my account and saw it in the red from cash advance fees. A text arrived. My card was temporarily locked for unusual activity. I still had to pay the parking fee to get out of the garage. I turned to my friend and asked for a quick loan. I hated that feeling, dragging someone else into my dumb decision. I held the ticket, stood in line to pay, staring at the floor. On the drive back, I turned the radio off. If I played upbeat music, it would feel fake. If I played something sad, it would feel dramatic. I left only the hum of the AC. I thought about my mom. I replayed every step I had taken, like watching a slow-motion clip. I could see exactly where I lost control. I treated probability like it owed me, when every spin is its own event. I wouldn't quit because my pride was tied to a promise. I raised my bets out of anger, then rationalized it with the story that I just needed one. That night back home, I opened my banking app and stared at the fees. I set the phone down, poured a glass of water, and sat breathing for a few minutes. I texted my mom that the trip was fun, but the gift would have to wait. She replied with a few lines asking how I was feeling. I read it and felt lighter and sad at the same time. I knew I let emotions drive. I admitted I can be foolish and greedy when I gamble. I wasn't going to use that as an excuse to beat myself up forever, but I wrote down the lesson. I'll take the small loss today so I wouldn't meet a bigger loss tomorrow. The next morning, I called the friend who covered my parking and paid him right away. I thanked him properly. I also promised myself that if I ever duck into a casino after events like weddings again, I'll bring only a small amount of cash and leave my card at home or locked in the car. I'll set an alarm to make me walk outside after an hour, win or lose. I won't let a streak drag my feelings out and pull my wallet along. Next time I bring up my mom, I want it to be about a good meal I cook for her, not a gift I tried to force a win for. 2. When you're hot, you have to bet big. That weekend in Arizona, my friends and I wrapped up a pickup basketball game at a court near Phoenix. We were all sweaty, hungry, and already planning a real barbecue feast for the night. I had an idea that sounded generous, but was actually pretty foolish. Swing by the tribal resort nearby, hit the casino for a bit, win some money, and treat the whole crew. In my head, the goal was simple: win just enough to cover dinner. I told myself I'd play light and not do anything reckless. It sounded reasonable, but I've got this built-in mix of greed and excitement that only needs a small excuse to flare up. Inside the casino, I went straight to a blackjack table because it's the one game I feel I understand. I exchanged a little cash for chips and sat down like I was just there for the experience. First hand, small win. Second hand, win again. After a few hands in a row, my stack got a bit thicker. My heart picked up, but in a happy way. I started patting myself on the back for reading the cards. I thought I was in control. Really, I was getting that fake sense of skill just because a few things broke my way. I kind of knew that, but I chose to ignore it because winning felt so good. My friends wandered the food court and circled back now and then to watch. I ordered another drink because I was riding the high. Every time I won, I laughed a little louder than usual. I liked having people watch me, liked seeing more chips than when I'd sat down. A hero fantasy started forming in my head. If I win a little more, tonight's barbecue is gonna be epic, and I'm picking up the tab. I told myself I was doing it for the group, but really I was feeding my ego. I wanted to show off, to be noticed, so I started pressing my bets. While I was raising, I kept telling myself I had a solid reason, because I was hot. Stringing wins together made me forget luck can turn on you anytime. With more chips in front of me, my confidence swelled. I leaned back, smiled at the people at the table, and tapped my fingers like this was my usual weekend hangout. In my head, I ran a simple plan on repeat. Just a few more hands, hit my number, then cash out. But right then, I felt my hand shove out more chips than I'd planned. I loved the sound of the chips clacking, loved the rush of putting out a big bet. I whispered to myself that I only needed one more push. I was overconfident from a handful of wins and mistook the streak as proof of some special ability. Then came the hand where I put out my biggest bet of the night. The energy around the table ticked up. A couple of my buddies stood behind me, hyped. I could hear my own heartbeat. My hand shook a little, and I tried to look calm. I wanted to show off. I wanted the whole table to see I could play big. At that point, I wasn't thinking about the barbecue. I was thinking about the feeling of raking in chips. I told myself this would be an easy close. The dealer dealt. My cards looked decent. There was still a path. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my face still. Then the dealer kept drawing until 21. The table let out a surprised noise, and for me, it felt like my stomach dropped straight through my chest. My biggest bet of the night disappeared in seconds. I lost my cool. My face heated up, my fist clenched, and a reckless order lit up in my head. Get it back now. After that punch, I didn't leave. I parked in my seat to chase. I shoved in chips like I was running after a shadow I'd just lost. I told myself I was still lucky enough to flip it. Really, I was just chasing a feeling. I forgot the original plan, small profit and walk away on time. I started firing bigger in the next hands and lost my sense of pace. The losses stacked up. Each time I lost, I pushed more. That loop ate through what I had left as fast as an escalator going the wrong way. I watched my tray empty and felt heavier with every hand. I knew I was being irrational, but I didn't want to stop because then I'd have to face the truth. I'd just wrecked a night that was supposed to be fun for everyone. I finally left the table with my pockets light. Walking past the food court, the smell of grilled meat made me feel sick. I checked my phone. The group chat was full of talk about cuts of meat, sauces, seating. I froze, typed a message to duck out of the barbecue, and said I wasn't feeling great, maybe another time. Everyone replied with no worries, which only made me more embarrassed. I realized my goal sounded generous, but the way I went about it was just using money to feed my own greed. Those early wins lifted me up, and I crowned myself skilled. I forgot that at the table, luck shows up and leaves fast. And I also forgot that treating friends should be a joy, not pressure to place big bets. Driving out of the resort, hot, dry desert air hit my face. I sat in the parking lot for a moment thinking about the version of me that first took that seat. I had a small plan, easy to stick to, and I threw it away for a few minutes of showing off. I didn't lose because of one bad hand. I lost because I wanted to prove something. I liked the attention, the table's cheers, and I traded clear judgment for that feeling. The lesson landed hard. When I'm winning, my brain is quick to tell me I'm exceptionally skilled, and I start stepping over my own safety lines. Those rushing moments are when I need discipline the most, not when I'm losing. That night, my friends still met up to eat. I showed up late with a tray of salad I grabbed on the way. I smiled, cracked jokes, and told my story with some self-teasing to keep things light. Inside, I wrote a new rule for myself. I don't want to be the guy standing off to the side next time, watching everyone grill because of my own greed. If I treat friends, it should be with money I saved, not whatever I just risked on a table. If I play, I'll play for fun, stop at the right time, and keep it as part of the trip, not a mission I have to complete. 3. A near miss means the machine is about to pay. I'll tell you about that night at the Las Vegas airport. The city was already behind me, but the fried food smell and the whir of slot machines still clung to my jacket. My late flight home had 30 minutes until boarding. I told myself I'd just kill a little time, not get sucked in, and, most important, definitely not miss the flight. I took a sip of water, checked the departures board, patted my pocket to make sure my ticket and boarding pass were there. The goal sounded simple: pass half an hour and know when to stop. Right next to my gate was a row of bright, blinking slots. It's Vegas. These things are everywhere, even in the airport. I sat at one, picked the minimum bet just to play a few spins for fun. On the first pull, the screen stopped on 2 matching symbols. I paused to analyze. I started to feel lucky just because 2 icons matched, even though nothing said the next spin would be any different. The feeling of being close to a win arrived fast, like a light tap that convinced me a little more would do it. I fed in a little more money, convinced I was about to win because the last spin had 2 matching symbols. I paused to analyze. I wanted to prove my hunch right, more than accept that it was only a hunch. My stubborn streak refused to back down, even though I had 0 evidence. The machine stopped on 2 matching symbols again. I sat up straighter. I smiled to myself and looked at my watch. 26 minutes left. I figured I still had time for a few more pulls. I paused to analyze. I started pushing my stopping line back. I'd come with 30 minutes, now it was 26, and I still felt safe, as if those 4 minutes didn't matter. In reality, I was ignoring the most important signal, the clock. I bumped the bet a little, still thinking I was just a hair away. Once more, the machine showed 2 matching symbols. My heart jumped. I felt like I was about to grab a win. I paused to analyze. That near-win feeling made me forget the odds were still way against me. I wasn't looking at the money ticking down. I was staring at the 2 matching pictures and imagining the third one waiting right behind them. The overhead speakers chimed. I heard my airline's name, the gate number, and the words inviting passengers to begin boarding. I glanced to the right. The first group was lining up. I figured my group would be later. I pulled again. 2 matches again. I paused to analyze. I was cherry-picking the bits of info that let me stay, like the fact my group hadn't been called yet. I treated that as a good enough reason to not stand up. I checked the time again. 19 minutes left. I cooked up a ridiculous little formula in my head. Each pull takes around 10 seconds, so I could squeeze in a few more and still make it. I paused to analyze. I was doing math that served what I wanted. I didn't count the time to line up, the chance they'd speed through the groups, or the possibility the gate could close early. I only counted in a way that bought me more spins. The overhead speakers called the next group. I half stood, then sat back down because the machine had just spit out a line that looked really close to a win. I felt yanked by an invisible string. I was afraid of quitting right before the finish line. This was straight up fear of missing out. I was scared that if I left now, the machine would hit big 1 minute later without me. That feeling was so strong, I forgot that a big hit here had never once happened to me. I fed money again, as fast as people hammer the elevator button even though it won't make it arrive faster. I pulled with a rhythm I convinced myself was just right. The reels spun and stopped. 2 matching cymbals again. I exhaled hard. I paused to analyze. The closer I felt to winning, the more I believed I was doing the right thing, even though there was no new evidence. The near-win feeling blotted out everything else. Final boarding call blared. I heard the words, "board immediately." I still believed I had time for one more. I pulled. The screen spun. My heart spun with it. No win. I turned to the gate. The line had thinned. I grabbed my backpack and hurried over. The agent had already gone inside. The door was shut. The sign said the gate was closed. I stood there catching my breath, sweat beading even in the air conditioning. I paused to analyze. I'd turned a time killer into a trap for myself. I treated the near-win feeling like a good signal, and I paid for it with a real opportunity, boarding on time. I went to the help desk and switched to a morning flight. The change fee plus the fare difference burned in my throat. I found a seat in the waiting area and curled into my jacket. The night at the airport was longer than I expected. I bought a coffee to stay awake and a breakfast sandwich because I was starving. The total damage that night, change fee, water, food, ended up bigger than what I'd lost at the slot machine. I paid way too much for one dumb mistake. The next morning, I shuffled onto the new flight with dark circles under my eyes. I didn't have a single excuse that sounded reasonable anymore. I remembered my original goal, kill 30 minutes and know when to stop so I wouldn't miss the flight. I managed to mess up both. 4. Double the next bet to win back this loss. I went to Reno for work. Packed daytime meetings, free nights. My hotel sat right in the neon glow, dice clacking in the lobby downstairs. I figured I'd swing by to soak in the vibe, maybe play a few small rounds if it felt fun, and then head back. A very ordinary goal flashed in my head. Make up the missing bit of my rent. I knew that was a reckless thought, but I still believed I could keep myself in check. I told myself a little discipline would be enough. I stopped at a dice table. People tossed 2 dice, and the whole table cheered. I put a small amount on the most basic bet. First roll hit. I felt lighter, like a knot about rent had loosened. I could tell I was going easy on myself because of that early luck. I reminded myself to stay calm. Next round, I made the same bet. Win again. My heart sped up. I told myself not to raise the stakes yet. Take it slow. But the urge to go faster spread through me like an old habit coming back. After a few rounds, I tried something I'd heard somewhere. If I lost, I'd double the next bet to win it back immediately. I'd decided it was a smart way to play. The idea lit up inside me. Simple, reasonable, effective. I was pulled in by how neat and quick it sounded. I didn't want to wait, didn't want to take small losses and build back from scratch. I also knew I was drifting into a way of thinking that focused only on the most recent result and ignored the longer-term risk. At first, everything went smoothly. I'd lose a small round, double, then win the next and get my money back plus a little extra. I felt clever. I told myself this approach wasn't scary at all. I forgot a bad streak can last longer than you expect. I started smiling every time I set chips down, as if I'd found a foolproof formula for this game. I stopped paying attention to time and stared only at the stack of chips in front of me. I was treating feelings as proof instead of using the worst-case scenario to protect myself. Then the losing streak hit. One loss. I doubled. Lost again. I doubled. I felt sweat in my palms. I looked at the sign with the table rules and saw the maximum bet. I still reassured myself that one win would reset everything. This was the moment I was protecting my original idea more than my money. I wouldn't accept that bad luck could keep going. Third loss in a row, I doubled again. My heartbeat kept climbing. I tried to look calm, but in my head I was already doing rent math and the electric bill. I watched the chip stack thin out and still told myself one more step and I'd quit. I'd fallen into that I'm already in, might as well see it through mindset, like I couldn't stand the thought of my earlier effort becoming nothing. I forgot the money on the table was real cash, not just numbers in a game. Then I hit a round where the amount I needed to bet to follow the plan met the table limit. I couldn't double anymore. That was something I hadn't considered from the start. I shoved the maximum in, feeling like I was placing all my hope on that one roll. This wasn't a plan anymore. It was a wish. The dice stopped. The table went quiet. Then everyone exhaled together. I lost at the heaviest level. The plan collapsed right there. I stared at the empty space in front of me. The stack of chips had almost vanished. Heat rose at the back of my neck, and my hand reached for my pocket for more cash without thinking. I pulled out the rest of the rent money I'd brought. I told myself I'd win back a little just to save face with myself. I placed a few small bets because I didn't have enough to keep doubling. A few minutes later, that was gone too. There was nothing left to recover. I stood at the edge of the table for a second, listening to the steady background music, hearing other people laugh when they won. I went back up to my room and opened my phone to run the numbers again. I was short exactly the rent amount. I looked at a photo of my guitar, the one that sits in the corner of the room. That guitar's been with me since high school. On tired nights, I'd strum a few simple songs. I knew I was about to put it up for sale. Losing money already hurt, but losing a piece of my routine hurt even more. I was paying for a decision I could have avoided from the very first loss in that streak. The next day, I took the guitar to a nearby pawn shop. They looked it over, named a price, and I nodded. Cash in hand, I felt hollow. I could see exactly what I'd done. I traded something that gives me long-term joy just to chase a short burst of getting even. I learned that once I get swept up in the idea of clawing losses back, I don't know where to stop. I paid the rent, got it handled, but the room felt much quieter that night. I sat by myself, thinking about that evening at the dice table as an expensive lesson I gave myself. 5. Winnings are the house's money. Go big, no regrets. That weekend, I tagged along with some horse race-obsessed friends to Santa Anita Park in California. Clear skies, warm sun, a packed parking lot, everyone buzzing. We told ourselves we were there to watch for fun and throw down a few small tickets for a little thrill. I kept repeating that this was mostly a hangout. If I ended up a bit ahead, I'd treat everyone to dinner at the food court. In my head, I set a limit for myself. I felt pretty clear-headed, even though I know I'm the type who gets carried away, especially when money's involved. For the first race, I picked a horse with a name that just sounded right, skimmed the info board, and bought a small ticket. I wasn't expecting much, just wanted my heart rate up a notch. When that horse came in first, I laughed out loud in surprise. Watching that money drop into my pocket made my whole body feel light. In a snap, I told myself this was the house's money, not something I'd sweated to earn. I separated the little stack of winnings and gave myself permission to play freely with that pile. Riding the high, I pulled a couple friends over to grab drinks. I was talking big, waving my winning ticket around. I felt looser than usual just because I'd made a quick score. I kept saying the goal was to have fun, but underneath, I wanted to keep this lucky run going as long as possible. I knew I was trying to stretch out that floating feeling. By the second race, I upped my bet. The logic I fed myself sounded perfectly reasonable. I was playing with house money. I granted myself permission to take a bigger risk. I didn't want the excitement to dip. Part of me even thought, maybe today is my bay. I could feel myself tying one lucky moment to the rest of the afternoon. I knew that wasn't smart, but the hype won out. The second ticket didn't hit, but I wasn't cooling off. I went back to the window and added a few exotic combinations for the next race, stringing together outcomes to make it feel more suspenseful. I bought more snacks for the group too. I told myself it was fine because I was still spending the house's money. I felt my discipline slipping. I was treating the winnings like they weren't part of my real bankroll, and that sweet little trap made me carefree. The old thought popped up. If I lose one ticket, just go bigger on the next and claw it back. That idea made me bolder without any good reason. For the third race, I went bigger again. I stood by the rail, eyes glued to the track like I was hypnotized. When I filled out the ticket, my hand shook a little from the nerves. I pictured my horse crossing first and all of us celebrating over a huge dinner. I knew I was spending the reward in my head before anything happened. I was letting my feelings steer, instead of sticking to what I was actually willing to lose. I kept ignoring one simple thing. Winnings are still my sweat, not free gifts. The climax came faster than I expected. In the next two races, my horses finished way back. In one of them, my pick faded halfway through and never recovered. I stared at the results board and watched my tickets turn into zeros. The crowd was still roaring, but I felt a clean, hollow space inside. I flipped the remaining bills in my hand and saw the stack had thinned out in a really dumb way. I could see clearly that I'd paid for treating winnings like someone else's cash. I kept raising my stakes just to hang on to the buzz, not for any calm or rational reason. The group stayed cheerful. One friend told stories about a favorite horse from childhood. Another showed off a photo by the rail. I tried to join in, but my brain was doing math. The early win was gone. Add in rounds of drinks and snacks, and I was deep in the red compared to when I walked in. I didn't complain. After all, I'd been the generous one earlier. I knew I opened my wallet too fast. I remembered the original plan. Have fun, and if I ended up ahead, treat everyone to dinner. In reality, I treated people before I even knew if I was ahead. I took a lap around the grandstand to breathe. I looked at the turf, watched the teams tending to the horses, and reminded myself what I should have done. Right after that first win, I should have stashed half or all of it in a separate pocket and called it done. I should have kept my bet size the same so my emotions couldn't drag my hand higher. I finally understood that by separating winnings from my money, I gave myself permission to spend loosely, place riskier tickets, and act overly generous. The ending was the predictable script: down money and disappointed. For the final race of the afternoon, I thought about placing a tiny ticket to soothe my ego, then stopping. Instead, I stopped completely. I watched without betting. I wanted to remind myself what it felt like to enjoy the race for its own sake, not to chase luck. I felt myself settle, and I could see the mistake of the whole day clearly. Keeping the wallet steady is the real win. Let the excitement come and go on its own. By the time we left the track, the air had cooled. We talked about hitting a casual spot nearby. I checked my balance on my phone and winced at how it was lower than it had been that morning. I told myself that next time, if I want to treat everyone, I'll decide after I settle up at the end of the day, not after an early hit. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. If I'm playing for fun, then keep it fun. And money still needs discipline even when it's money I just won. 6. My private trick for controlling the outcome. That night, I boarded a riverboat in New Orleans. On the lower deck was the casino. Craps tables lit up, people packed shoulder to shoulder, jazz drifting over from the bar. As I stepped into the casino, I told myself I was in control because I had set a limit before I walked in. In my head was a little thrill: make a bit of money, head out early. I squeezed up to the rail and watched the 2 dice glide over the green felt. Someone won. Hands slapped the rail, chips clacked together in a happy rattle. I took a chip rack and drew a deep breath. I hate the feeling of leaving things to chance, so I invented a way to feel in control. I decided every throw would follow the same ritual. Roll the dice 3 times in my palm, tap them lightly on the edge of the table, inhale and count silently, then let them go. On the first toss, the dice landed on exactly what I'd bet. The dealer pushed tips my way. I smiled, light as if I'd just proved an easy experiment. I mistook familiarity for the power to change the result. People around me cheered. A few held up fists for a friendly bump, and I bumped back. The noise pumped me up, my hands warmed, my breathing steadied, and I pressed out a few more chips. I told myself the little steps kept me calm, and calm meant safer bets. The first few rounds went smoothly. I bet more, feeling like I had taken command of this game. I believed if I kept my rhythm, things would keep going well. I was wagering on a feeling, not on reality. The boat swayed a little, a server passed with food, the smell of fried shrimp drifted by, and the background music shifted into something more upbeat. Then I added new details to the ritual. Before I threw, I tapped a fingertip on the rail once. I stood with my shoes aligned to a painted floor stripe. I pinched the dice with exactly 3 fingertips, no more, no less. I believed I was locking risk out. Inside, I felt safe because I had a script. I confused the order of my ritual with the order of probability. Then came the pivot point. My supposedly perfect rhythm started spitting out bad numbers in a row. The first time, I froze a second, thinking maybe my stance was off. The second time, I reset my feet. Still bad. The third time, I held my breath longer. Still bad. I tensed up and clung to the ritual, convinced my hands would come back. I hated admitting I was wrong in a crowd that was shouting and laughing, so I kept betting, hoping for a sudden reversal. I was chasing the letdown to recapture the first high. The chips in my rack thinned out. I raised my bet because I thought the next throw would be the one where I executed perfectly. I told myself silently that I just needed one clean hit to even things out. I believed I was calm, but really I was swimming against my own psychology. Sweat made the dice slick. I added another step, wiping my hand on my jeans. My ritual grew heavier and fussier, a string of movements before every single toss. Still, people whooped at each roll, but now the sound was sharp, not charming like when I had arrived. I started redoing my original limit. I had passed it, and I kept making excuses. I told myself I'd come all this way, and wasting now would waste the trip. I confused effort with control. Losing made me think the next one had to be different, even though I knew the rules made no promises. I kept betting because I feared the unfinished feeling more than I feared losing money. Another bad roll. The dealer swept in my chips. My hand slowed. My new ritual suddenly felt heavy. I looked at the rack, more than half gone. I remembered my original goal, keep it light and fun. Now my face felt tight, like I was waiting for test results. I exhaled, set the dice down, and gave the spot to someone else. I stepped back from the table, shoulders dropping as I accepted what I hadn't wanted to admit from the start. I had been betting on a feeling, not on facts. I had mistaken a practiced motion for the power to change outcomes. I hated leaving things to chance, so I picked a comforting story that I was in control, just to ease my nerves. Out on the deck, the river wind was unmistakably cool. The boat slid along the bank, lights on the water streaking into bright lines. I leaned on the rail, opened my wallet, and counted what I'd just lost. The number didn't crush me, but it was enough to show that I'd broken the promise I'd made to myself. I thought about the ritual. It was really just a self-soothing habit, like tightening your shoelaces before a run. It helps you stay calm, that's all. The outcome is random. It won't follow my hand no matter how many circles I spin. I went back inside, bought a can of soda, and watched other people play without putting money down. From a step back, everyone looked confident. Everyone had a signature grip. I saw my earlier self in them and smiled. The smile felt a little gentler because I'd stopped. I let the night end earlier than I'd planned, but in a way that matched what I needed to learn. 7. I've already burned so much. Stopping now would be a waste. Keep playing to recoup. A rainy night in Seattle. I sat in my small apartment, hoodie still damp from the afternoon drizzle. I opened my phone and pulled up a slots site for fun. I kept it simple. Play a little after a long day, spend a small amount just to take the edge off. I put on some soft music, set a can of soda next to me, and reminded myself to keep spending tight. In my head, I believed I was in control. I felt pretty steady, like any ordinary evening. I deposited a small amount. First spin, loss. Second spin, loss again. I started getting irritated at the bad luck. I told myself it was just a warm-up. Stay calm. My fingers tapped faster, eyes glued to the screen, heartbeat a little harder. I figured if I could win back a bit, I'd feel lighter, and then shut it down and go to sleep. I added more money. My new balance popped up, and I chose a slightly higher bet, thinking I needed to speed up to make up for it. I knew I was heated, but the frustration of losing pushed me forward. I told myself the goal wasn't entertainment anymore. Just cut the losses and I'd be fine. I could feel my original plan slipping, but I looked away from it because I didn't want to face the growing red number. Next spin, still nothing. I frowned and took a sip of soda that had no taste. I tapped a few more times, hoping to see a line of icons light up. Nothing. My stomach felt heavy, like I was tying money to a leaky bag. I didn't want to waste what I'd already put in, so I kept hanging on. A familiar line ran through my head. I've already spent so much. It'll be a waste to quit. I knew how dumb that sounded, but it clung to me anyway. I opened the deposit page again. This time I started thinking about a paycheck advance. Just a little, I told myself, so I'd have a chance to win back enough and pay it back next week. I comforted myself with the idea that a good spin was coming soon. No one stays cold forever. I was afraid to admit defeat now because that would mean all the time and money were just gone. I'd borrowed from the future to cover for the present me. It sounded awful, but with my hands hot, it felt like an exit. I opened the Advance app and dragged the slider to a number that felt comfortable. The fee wasn't pleasant, but the thought of a jackpot made me wave it off. I could feel my breath quicken, heart thumping harder. I knew those were bad signs, but I pushed myself anyway because I was scared of missing the window to recover. I hit spin. Loss. Spin again. Another loss. I started counting under my breath how many wins I'd need to bring the whole back to something bearable, then tweaked the math in ways that favored me. I could tell I was bending reality. Rain tapped steadily against the window. The room was quiet, except for the little buzz my phone made at the end of each round. I tried changing bet sizes and then switching to another game on the same site, as if changing seats would change my luck. I knew I was lying to myself, but the feeling of "don't waste what you already spent" pulled me one step further. I started biting my lip. My hand trembled a bit. I promised myself that if I saw even one small good sign, I'd cash out. That sign never came. I went back to the Advance app for the second time. Not much limit left. I exhaled hard. I told myself I only needed a short streak. The clock had slipped past midnight. I felt tired, but I was scared to stop because I knew seeing the loss in the morning would hurt. I chose to keep going, even though it only gets blurrier the later it gets. I knew I was letting regret drive. The peak came when I hit the Advance cap. The app flashed a message, "No more allowed." I tapped again, confused. Nothing changed. I went back to the slots and spun a few more times with what balance I had left. Then it was gone. My thumb still pressed the spin button out of habit. The phone didn't respond because the account was empty. I sat there for a few seconds, blank. A chill ran across my back even though the AC was off. I realized how far I'd drifted from the original plan in just a couple of hours. When the quiet settled in, I opened my email and saw a notice from my carrier. The phone bill was due. I looked at my checking balance, did the math on the Advance, and added the fee. I knew right away a late payment would be hard to avoid. My chest felt heavy. The easy math I'd been doing earlier suddenly turned sharp and clear. Late fees stack, advances aren't free, and regret doesn't pay for anything. I felt exhausted and a little ashamed of myself. I closed the slot site, went into settings, and deleted the app. I paused for a beat, then hit confirm. My screen went back to normal with the usual icons. I told myself straight, no dodging. A loss is a loss. I took a breath, got a glass of water, and listened to the rain on the eaves. The heaviness was still there, but at least things had stopped. I opened my budget notebook and wrote down the loss plus a few short lines. Reason, start time, end time. I looked at my own handwriting and saw the thing I'd tried to ignore all night. The harder I chased, the farther I got from the goal. I went to bed late knowing I'd have to call the carrier tomorrow to ask for a grace period and eat the fee. I felt a little sad, but I also felt like I'd yanked the handbrake before I went over. I thought back to the moment I opened the app. The goal was just a little entertainment. I had abandoned that halfway and chased a new goal cooked up by emotion. I realized the lesson was right there in the moment I changed the goal and refused to admit it. 8. My friend just hit it big. Mine's coming next. Super Bowl day in Austin is always loud. At my friend's place, there was a giant screen, a long table piled with wings and fries, a bowl of queso steaming with the smell of cheese, and the fridge stuffed with sodas. I told myself I was only there for fun today, nothing over the top. I'm American, and I'm sometimes pretty foolish and greedy when it comes to gambling, so I kept repeating my original goal: place a small bet for the vibe and just watch the game. In my head, I felt calm. I wanted to blend in with my friends, have a good time, and not turn the watch party into a chase for money. At first, I opened the app and put a small ticket on the team I liked and a modest number on the game total. I felt relieved for sticking to the plan. I figured if I stopped there, I'd eat, cheer, snap a few photos, and sleep well. I rated myself as off to the right start, not letting emotions drag me around. I also felt confident because I'd written my max stake in my phone notes earlier that morning and planned to stick to it. Then the bragging started. One friend flashed last week's winning ticket. Another pulled up screenshots of a multi-leg parlay with a huge payout. The room exploded every time someone retold a big win. I listened and felt my heartbeat climb past normal. I realized I was only hearing the noise of their wins. I couldn't see how many losses they had because nobody saves the broke and busted screenshots to share. I felt a little left out because my ticket looked too tame. I wanted a story to tell in the group, wanted credit for being bold and interesting too. I reopened the app. My fingers moved faster. I added a few longer shot picks with bigger potential payouts. I built a parlay, then added a couple of live bets based on the first quarter. The logic was simple. If my friends hit it big and I only had one tiny ticket, I'd feel bummed. I knew that thinking wasn't sensible, but with the room heating up, my reasoning stepped back. I was afraid of missing out on the same moment they were having. I tapped again. I could tell I wasn't playing for fun anymore. I was playing to catch up to other people's stories, and the risk had climbed past the budget I set. In the second quarter, the team I was rooting for went ahead. One of my small tickets turned green, showing a chance to win. I got hyped and told myself I was on the right track. That feeling pushed me to add one more reckless slip, even though I knew the odds weren't great. I noticed I was clinging to a single good moment, using it to justify a string of decisions after it. I whispered to myself it would be just this one last time. Then I added another when the living room roared at a long run. I felt like someone outside the party trying to elbow my way into the center. By the third quarter, my friend laughed big and showed the room a parlay that was getting very close to hitting. Everyone shouted. I swallowed a sip of water too fast. My pride ran hot. I wanted a ticket like that so I could post a celebratory status later. I added another slip, with a bigger stake than before. I knew I was walking away from the plan, but a voice in my head shoved me forward. If you don't take a shot, you won't have a story to tell. I could see it clearly. I was craving approval so much that I forgot my actual finances. The climax came in the final quarter. The game flipped. The other team scored in bunches, and all my rushed analysis fell apart. The risky picks missed one after another. On my phone, my ticket slid from hopeful to solid red. I sank into the couch. The room stayed loud, but now it was my friends yelling as the other team racked up points and their big win hopes came back to life. I looked at the projected losses about to hit my account and felt the skin on my neck tighten. I blamed myself for not stopping when I still could. I realized I'd let other people's victory narratives drown out my own plan for discipline. The final whistle blew. 2 lucky friends hugged and celebrated. They posted, and the group piled on likes and comments. I opened my phone to see the totals. The loss number twisted my stomach. I thought about next week's budget, the credit card bill, the oil change appointment. I couldn't enjoy the night, even though I forced a smile to play along. Driving home over the bridge in the Austin night wind, I went slow to cool my head. I thought through the cause. I only heard their wins, not their losses. I was afraid of being left out. I wanted recognition. I took on risk beyond my wallet because of a momentary mood. Back home, I opened the morning note. The max bet line was right there, crystal clear. I stared at it like I was looking at the calmer, smarter version of myself from a few hours earlier. I regretted not protecting my best decision. I typed the loss into my expense tracker. It wasn't pleasant, but it made me face reality. I promised myself that next time, if I watch the Super Bowl again, I'll place one small ticket ahead of time and lock my phone in a drawer. I don't need other people's stories to make my night meaningful. I need to keep my wallet safe first. Mine. Chips, points, virtual money aren't real money. Let's go wild. The cruise ship pulled out of Miami on a sunny afternoon. Sea wind blasted across the deck. I tucked my sunglasses up on my head, a glass of juice in hand, and quickly mapped out the next few days with my family. Morning at the pool, buffet at noon, a show in the afternoon, an evening stroll, then bed early. I told myself I'd only play a little once the casino opened, and I wouldn't mess up my sleep schedule. I felt pretty confident. Everything seemed under control, including the tiny indulgence of sitting at a table for a few minutes just to soak in the vibe. On the first night, the casino doors opened, lights blazing like they were calling my name. I swapped cash for a neat stack of chips. With those little round pieces in my hand, spending suddenly felt weightless because no bills were actually leaving my wallet. I analyzed myself for a second and admitted I spend easier when I don't see cash. I picked small bets, table hopped whenever I got bored, sat for a few hands here and there, then moved on. I kept grinning, thinking I was being smart because I was betting small. Win or lose a little, who cares? I avoided checking the running total because I didn't want to kill the mood. I told myself it was only the first night. Don't be hard on yourself. The next morning, I still got up in time for breakfast with the family. We went to watch dolphins, took photos, joked around on deck. I felt relieved that the day plan was still on track. That night, I swung by the casino again. I had a few chips left from the night before, and seeing them in the tray made me tell myself I was still fine. Having chips sitting there made me think I had room to play, as if it wasn't real money. I kept bouncing between tables and machines, still sticking to small wagers. I let time slide by and drifted past the counter where I could check my statement without actually stopping. I realized I was avoiding it because I didn't want to cut off my own fun. I told myself straight up that I was choosing to stay in the dark. On day 3, when the ship docked, the family headed to the beach. I grabbed a floppy hat and chased the kids onto the sand. Simple and fun. Back on board, I looked at my tray and saw a few stray chips. It felt like dank roll, even though it was really just leftovers from earlier exchanges. That night, I stepped into the casino again. The aircon was cool, the music steady. I didn't raise my stakes, still small, but I kept moving fast from spot to spot. Every little loss I reassured myself it was only a slice of those chips. Spending got easier and easier because everything was happening through little plastic discs. I knew I was being fooled by the feeling of holding chips instead of cash, but I ignored it so I wouldn't wreck the mood. By day 4, I was a bit worn out from not sleeping enough. I still tried to keep the family schedule because I'd promised this was a relaxation trip. I told myself I needed to shorten casino time. Yet that evening, walking by, I ducked in again, justifying it with only a little while. I changed out a bit more cash for chips because I figured I'd finish it off tonight. I still bet small, but spread myself across more tables. My strategy was to keep moving seats to find a lucky pocket, when really I was just stretching the play. I never stopped to add up how much I'd already converted because in my head I clung to the idea that if there were still chips, I was fine. I knew I was avoiding the numbers on purpose, and that's exactly how I lost control inch by inch. On the last day, the family was packing in the afternoon. I was carrying a few bags of souvenirs I'd grabbed from the onboard shop. I was in a good mood. Farewell dinner, family photos, early night. Before dinner, I swung by the service desk to check the room account. The screen flashed a long column of numbers. I froze for a few seconds and felt my stomach drop. The total was way higher than I had imagined. All those tiny chip exchanges, all those small bets scattered across tables had combined into one big block. I read the lines one by one and realized I'd separated money from any real feeling for too long. I felt embarrassed that I'd underestimated the weight of those chips. I handed over my card to pay. The first swipe got declined. I just stood there. My face went hot and I started thinking the bank had flagged unusual activity. I called and explained the charges were legit on the ship, that I was the one spending, that everything was fine. After a few verification steps, the card was unfrozen. I paid, but when I looked at the gift budget left, I knew something had to give. The extra little things I'd planned to buy for the family had to be shelved. I felt both deflated and annoyed with myself. I knew the problem wasn't one big losing hand. It was a chain of small choices paired with intentional blur. I spent easier because I never saw real bills leave my wallet. I avoided checking totals because I didn't want to kill the buzz. I kept believing that chips in the tray meant extra, when in fact that was money that had already left my account. At the farewell dinner, the whole family still ate and laughed, but I was quieter than usual. I watched the kids joke around, watched relatives choose dessert, and understood I'd traded a bunch of nothing for a few short minutes of feeling good. I didn't blame anyone. I just etched into my memory how those plastic pieces on the table made me forget what money actually is worth. 10. Borrow a card or take an advance. Pay it back tomorrow. It was a weeknight in Houston, and my friend's place had a small poker table going. People showed up early. The grill smelled like spicy chicken and potatoes, and soda cans hissed open, one after another. I walked in ready to hang out, telling myself I'd keep the stakes small, play a few hands, and head home early so I could work in the morning. In my head, I was even patting myself on the back for being disciplined. Tonight, I thought, is just a chill get-together. I lost a little in the first hand. I laughed it off, shrugged, and reminded myself I was fine. I felt a tiny sting of bad luck, but nothing serious. I told myself to slow down and stick to the leave early plan. Deep down, I still wanted to prove I wasn't a bad player, just warming up, that's all. Hands 2 and 3 flew by faster than I expected. Losing, then losing again, heated my face. I started pushing more money in with the thought of winning it back right now. In my head, a switch flipped. I can turn this around. I forgot my original goal. Hang out, keep it small. I pulled more cash from my e-wallet and told myself it was just a temporary advance. I even borrowed a little from a friend because I didn't bring much cash. I calmed myself with the idea that my paycheck would hit tomorrow and I'd settle up right away. I was very confident in tomorrow me, as if he were a different guy, more capable, more organized, able to tidy up everything. That confidence took the fear away for a few minutes, and then it nudged me to bet even bigger. The room buzzed. Cheers for wins, groans for losses. I dropped a few more hands, the steady kind of losses that pile up. I shoved in larger bets because I figured if I was already down, I had to punch hard to bounce back. I could hear my heartbeat, and my fingers wouldn't sit still on the felt. After each bet, I told myself I wasn't being greedy, I just wanted to make things fair tonight. The truth was, I was chasing, and I knew it, and I kept going anyway. The night stretched longer than planned. Sometime near midnight, I stopped checking the time. The go-home early idea was gone. I borrowed another round and told myself I'd pay it tomorrow. I left no room for anything unexpected. All I saw was a straight line. Lose, then claw it back, then repay, end of story. Close to dawn, I was deep in the hole. The number in my head flashed like a warning light. I watched my stack thin out and felt my stomach sink. I still believed tomorrow I'd figure it out, my usual self-comfort. I remembered the bills I had coming up that week and pushed the thought aside. I traded tomorrow's peace of mind for the thrill of maybe fixing it tonight. People started tidying up. I gathered my stuff, smiling, keeping my shoulders loose like I was fine. Inside, I made myself another promise. Tomorrow, clear-headed, I'd pay my friend back and lock down any borrowing when I play. I told myself that would be strong enough to help me sleep. In reality, I tossed and turned until almost sunrise. The next morning, I dragged myself to the car for work. I turned the key, the engine coughed and died. Tried again, nothing. A chill ran down my back because I knew this meant money. I called roadside assistance, watched the tow truck haul my car to the shop, and sat on the curb doing math in my head. I started blaming myself for not planning for surprises, just like last night when I ignored every warning sign. At the garage, the repair estimate hit my screen. The number was big enough to block any chance of paying off the poker debt immediately. I stared at my phone and the repayment plan I'd imagined, and my gut tightened. I texted my friend asking for a few days. I promised I'd work it out and pay as soon as possible. I knew he wasn't thrilled. I could feel the heavy silence between us, a friendship chipped by one night of chasing losses. That workday lasted longer than the night before. I stressed about the car and the debt at the same time. In my head, I went through every option. Cut spending here, cancel a plan there, push a meetup. It felt like tuition for a bad habit, putting too much faith in tomorrow me. A small game had turned into real tension with someone I cared about. That evening, I sat down with a piece of paper and wrote out the chain of decisions from the night before. I wrote the original goal, light hangout, then the bigger bets, the e-wallet top-up, the borrow, the promise to pay tomorrow. Looking at the whole chain, one thing stood out. I convinced myself it would all be fine because tomorrow I'd be better than today. But tomorrow isn't free. Tomorrow has to deal with the mess I left behind. Over the next few days, I put repayment first. I cut what I could, laid out a clear schedule for paying my friend back, apologized directly, and accepted his annoyance. I learned that once money wedges in, trust can change fast. I told myself to carve this lesson deep enough that next time I sit down at a table, I remember the exit. After a week, I paid off the first chunk and set a date for the rest. I decided to skip poker for a while. I don't want that feeling again. Waiting for a tow truck while my mental list is just people I owe. I reorganized my wallet and ditched the habit of keeping quick cash ready for games. I typed a big line into my phone. Don't borrow to gamble. Don't take an advance because I'll pay it tomorrow. By the end of that self-audit, 3 weak spots were obvious. I always believe tomorrow me is better than today, so I shove problems onto him. I leave no room for surprises, like a dead car on a morning that matters. And I put a friendship at risk for one night of chasing losses. Those 3 together were enough to turn a fun evening into a scrambled week.